I want to take this opportunity to introduce you to our next speaker. She is the Patient Engagement Manager at the National Ataxia Foundation, and she's here to share with you some information, connection, and community services that are offered through NAF. Please help me in welcoming Celeste Suart.
Well, hi everyone. Great to see folks. And thank you for sticking around for the final talk of the day, really. I remember for my first AAC, I was so overwhelmed in the best way possible with information, and it got a little bit tiring. So I appreciate you sticking until the end. It can take a lot of energy to be absorbing this much information all at once. So a couple of quick things. You've seen this disclaimer slide multiple times at this point. Those disclaimers, same for my talk. And then in terms of my presenter disclosures, plot twist, I'm a full-time employee for the National Ataxia Foundation. Shocker, I know. But you know what? Let's just put that out there. I think that's actually going to be beneficial for what we're going to be talking about today. So what can NAF do for me? I get this question a whole lot as the Patient Engagement Manager for the National Ataxia Foundation. The follow-up question I get, or comment rather, is, wait, NAF does that? Which, totally fair enough. There is a lot of things that we do. And we're going to be trying to cover some of those today, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of some of the services and resources that we have that are available to folks who are members of the National Ataxia Foundation and the general public at large. One quick disclaimer, I only have 45 minutes. So I've limited this specifically for resources we've designed for patients, family members, and the general community. If you're interested in resources for researchers, clinicians, nonprofit organizations, come find me at the banquet, we can chat later. So just a quick overview before we jump into the nitty-gritty. I like to imagine sort of the overlap of different things that our services and resources do. And I'd like to imagine as these four categories. So if you imagine NAF, we have education resources. So learning more about ataxia, about all the different types. Then we have research. This is learning more about ataxia, developing new treatments, investing in the cures of tomorrow. We also have care and support services and resources. So this is accessing healthcare. This is accessing different support within the community. And last, but certainly not least, there's advocacy and awareness services. So these are the initiatives to get people knowing what ataxia is and legislating, or at least trying to attempt to influence legislation that can improve the lives of ataxians around the world. So I'd like to think of this talk as a bit of a charcuterie board of options. I'm going to be, again, only 45 minutes. I'm going to give a really high-level overview of things. And you could look at some of the services and be like, that's not quite for me. Or you may see one or two or three, or hopefully more, that you're like, oh, I'd like to learn more about that. I'm intrigued by this. And on the slides that I'll be going through, there's going to be a picture or two or three or four of a NAF staff member who's particularly involved in this particular initiative. So if you have any questions, go find them, either in person here at the conference, or you'll be able to find our emails on the NAF website. And then we can chat a little bit more and go into some more detail. So with that, let's dive into things. So I'm going to start off by picking on me and some of the things that I'm involved with. So a lot of the times people will say, oh, I recognize your voice, but I don't know your face. And that's from my moderation of the Ataxia Type webinar series. We host this monthly. Our goal is to eventually have a deep dive webinar for every single type of ataxia, which we have our work cut out for us. There's over 300 kinds, but we're slowly making progress on this. So we host 1 to 2 webinars a month. This is a deep dive exploration specifically geared for patients and family members. We also record these webinars and we post them online. So if you aren't able to attend live, that is A-okay. Some of the currently available recordings we have unknown ataxia without family history. We have a multitude of dominant ataxias, including SCAs and episodic ataxia. For recessive ataxias, we have a webinar series on FA and SYNE1 ataxia. We're also going to be hosting more recessive-focused webinars over this summer. And then for acquired ataxia or sporadic ataxia, we currently have webinars on MSAC, autoimmune ataxia, and ataxia caused by stroke. Another one of our educational resources that we have put out there is our Prep Rare Clinical Trial Readiness Education Series. This is a series focusing on all aspects of ataxia research and clinical trials. So if you had a few questions during Dr. Moore's presentation of, I'd like to learn a little bit more about this, or what did that word mean, or I know there's multiple stages of clinical trials, but how are they all different from each other? We have a resource for that. So if you go to, this is a collection of webinars, articles, infographics, trying to explain some of the basics for clinical trials, or really it's basics for the people who do it every day. For the rest of us who are learning about it when life thrusts clinical trials upon us or rare conditions upon us, we're learning on the fly. So some examples of resources we have available is a webinar on safety in clinical trials, so what goes into making clinical trials safe, a webinar on finding ataxia information online that's accurate and helpful. We have an article on the 5 major steps in drug development, and we also have a walkthrough guide of using clinicaltrials.gov. Because if you've never used that before, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but with some practice, you can get the hang of it. We also have this patient blog called SCASource. So this is written by ataxia researchers, where we do summaries in plain English about ataxia research that is being published currently. We have 3 different types of articles. We have snapshot articles. This is when we explain one scientific concept clearly and concisely, because it's like, the key lingo that gets thrown around. There's so many acronyms in science. We have summary articles. These are the ones where we're recapping 1 or 2 specific ataxia research studies that have been done and sharing with you the key findings. And we also do what we call spotlights, where we're highlighting the profiles of ataxia research labs around the world and answering the question, hey, why are you studying ataxia? How did you get into this? What are you working on? We publish 2 to 4 articles a month. This is all volunteer work, so sometimes, especially during COVID, people had to delay some article writing, but we're getting back into the swing of things now, and new articles are posted on Friday. If you go to the web URL at the bottom of the screen, there is a way to sign up, so you can get notifications every time that we publish an article. We also don't just publish in English. We have translations in, we have English, we have French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, and we're hoping to grow those languages as we continue to grow. Another web page that we have on the National Ataxia Foundation website is our research participation page. This is a collection of resources for anyone who's looking to get more involved in ataxia research. This includes interventional trials where they're testing out a specific kind of treatment, observational trials, also called natural history studies, where you're seeing how disease progresses over time, how symptoms change as you age. We also have more basic research studies, trying to understand the fundamental things of what's happening inside of people's bodies and why ataxia is occurring in the first place. We're also going to be adding a section on this page for ataxia patient registry soon. A little bit earlier, you heard from Dr. Moore about the CORDS patient registry. That's the one that we help support, that we welcome all people with all forms of ataxia. There are also ataxia-specific registries. For example, there's one for FA, there's one for RSACs, and we're going to be having a list compiled in one place of all the registries that we're able to find. And if you're able to find one that we've missed, let us know, we'll add it to the page. Speaking of natural history studies, I want to shout out some of the work being done by my colleagues. So the CRC-SCA Natural History Study is one of the longest running ataxia natural history studies being done. We have 16 sites across Canada and the US, and people who have SCA 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 10, 27B or who have RFC1 ataxia, also sometimes known as Canvas, are eligible to participate. The visits are once per year. It's a great way to get involved. And if you do have any more questions, we have a ton of pamphlets that we spent at least 30 minutes folding over on the research table. So please go take some of them. Take them home. Look to see if it might be a good fit for you. Another way to get involved with research is ataxia brain donation. There's a lot of things that we can do with animal models and with live participants, but for some forms of research, we really need to be using brain samples. This is a very personal decision, and the people who do donate their tissue post-mortem, this is an incredibly valuable resource for the ataxia researcher community. Some brain banks, well, the reason the Ataxia Brain Bank was started was that we wanted to make sure that ataxia brains were being used for ataxia research, that it's not being used for controls for other neurodegenerative studies. So if you donate to this particular brain bank, we have processes in place to make sure that it's going to be the research being done with this tissue is being used to benefit the ataxians of today and the ataxians of tomorrow. So any people with any form of ataxia are eligible for donation. There is no cost to family members. You will still need to pay for funeral costs that are typical after someone passes, but there's no additional cost for donating. And again, samples are used to advance ataxia research specifically. You can sign up for this whenever. We do need to know fairly quickly after passing. We have a hotline where we can mobilize a team in order to retrieve the tissue. After about 6 hours, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do for research purposes, but Marianne is the person to ask about this. So moving back into more web-based resources, we recently launched a new genetics resource page. This is a one-stop shop to learn everything about genetic counseling and testing for ataxia. We worked with a group of genetic counselors to put this together. Some of the information you'll be able to find on there includes genetic testing basis, or basics, I need to pronunciate and go a little bit slower, resources for accessing genetic testing and genetic counseling. We also get a number of questions about genetic counseling and testing for ataxia, and we get the same questions often, so people are asking the same things. So we put together an FAQ section with some of the most common ones, and we also have a section on the science behind ataxia genetics. There's a lot to keep track of. It can be quite complex, so we have some resources there. And we're going to be adding new FAQ documents to this webpage every 2 to 3 months, and there's a form that if you have a particular question about ataxia genetics that's not currently on the page, you can submit that, and we'll work with a genetic counselor to write up a summary so that everyone can have that information. So this is one of our newer resources. We'd love to hear feedback, so let me know what you think. And then transitioning from a web page about genetic counseling to a genetic counseling and testing initiative. This is NAF's free genetic testing program for SCAs 1, 2, and 3. This is supported by my lovely colleague, Kelsey Trace. Currently, it's available for folks who are at risk for SCA 1, 2, and 3. We're hoping to expand it in the future, but for now, we have some funding constraints. And to be eligible for this program, you need to live in the United States, you need to be over 18 years old, you have to be a NAF member, and you have to have a family member or a biological family member who has a diagnosis of SCA 1, 2, or 3. And to learn more, you can go to our genetics page. We have a whole section on that as well. Another thing that Kelsey does is she helps manage our Ataxia Centers of Excellence program. This is a way to promote movement disorder clinics and ataxia clinics that are doing a particularly fantastic job at supporting ataxia patients. One of the comments we get very often is, I don't know where to go for care. Where can I find someone who's familiar with ataxia? So that's one of the reasons we started the Ataxia Centers of Excellence initiative. Clinics that receive an ACE designation have experts in clinical care for ataxias as well as ataxia-related disorders. These centers also have clinical research opportunities. So if you're interested in participating in research, this could be a very great fit. And there's also, these centers will provide their own educational resources and educational services for folks with ataxia. So it's really a one-stop shop. So moving on back to, well, another one of my colleagues, Lori Sjogren, which you've likely seen her this week. She's been doing a fantastic job running things behind the scenes here at AAC. And she's also the moderator for the Ask an Expert webinar series that we host here at NAF. This is an informal discussion style or ask me anything style webinar where you can ask any questions you have related to ataxia. We rotate through who the expert is every so often, but this year in 2024, all of the Ask an Expert webinars are going to be featuring Dr. Susan Perlman of UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles, and she is generously giving her time to answer all of our questions about ataxia within that hour. So I would highly recommend you to check that out. It's one of our most popular webinars. Additionally, we also have our Living with Ataxia webinar series. So this is a bit of a grab bag series. It has talks from ataxia care specialists and patient advocacy organizations that can teach you about different therapies for ataxia, such as PT, OT, and speech, talking about specific symptoms. We had a webinar about eye movement disorders and ataxia in the past year. There's also talks on recreation, financial planning, different support resources, and much more. So you never know quite what the topic is going to be, but you know it's going to be good. So I'd recommend you checking those out. This is a new initiative this year, specifically for care partners who are caring for a loved one with ataxia. We have a webinar series focusing on these individuals providing support. These topics include daily care, care planning, self-care, and other specialized subjects. So these are being held throughout the year. I believe the next one is happening in July, but if you check out the Care Partners section of the NAF website, you'll be able to find more information. And we also, just to wrap up, some of the things that Lori does to support ataxia patients is we have the Chair Yoga for Ataxia series. So for folks with ataxia, it can be very hard to stay active and get mobile. So NAF has partnered with Sacred Mountain Yoga to offer a special series for chair yoga and online to the community. And these sessions are accessible for folks in chairs and wheelchairs, and no previous experience is needed. So Lori helps moderate that. And if you haven't had a chance to attend one of the sessions, I know I've done a number of them on my lunch break. So it can be very fun to tune in and learn a little bit more about how yoga can be done in adaptive ways. Oh, sorry, I forgot this slide, but it's very important. So ataxia advocacy efforts. You've probably heard about this throughout the conference so far, things like Hill Day or the CDMRP funding program. But these are all advocacy efforts and grassroots efforts in order to change different policies and legislation to improve the lives of ataxians. So part of NAF's mission is to continue to advocate for folks with ataxia. Some of these things include United Against Ataxia Hill Day, directly lobbying Congress. There's the International Ataxia Awareness Day, so that we could have that be a thing, so we can celebrate and bring awareness to these rare disorders. And then continuing to have funding for ataxia research through the CDMRP program has been an invaluable resource for the community. I know Lauren previously talked about how important it is to have funding in order to have the research to find answers. And there's been a huge influx of research funding because of this particular program, and that was done through advocacy efforts led by you, people with ataxia who are going and speaking to their congressmen and women. So moving on from advocacy more to support, we have over 65 support groups for folks to connect with other ataxians. I know one of the things that's a highlight for me for the entire year is being here at AAC and being around so many people with ataxia who just get it. You don't really need to explain yourself. Everyone just knows what's happening. And being in a community with people who have similar experiences can be so valuable. So our support groups is one way to stay connected throughout the year, not just at AAC. So some support groups are focused on a specific geographic area. There's others that are for a specific lived experience, such as being under the age of 30 or being a veteran. If you check out our support groups web page, you'll be able to see all the different support groups that we have across not only the United States, but across the world. And meetings are held throughout the month. There's both in-person and virtual options. And if you do have any questions, the support groups are supported by my colleague, Sarah Pilato. She does a fantastic job with this, and she's wonderful to chat with, so I would encourage you to connect with her. So moving a little bit further on to some of the work that the NAF development team does. So if you are here at AAC, you've likely heard of the term walk and roll before, or the walk and roll to cure ataxia. This is one of the, NAF's largest grassroots fundraising campaign. So every year, thousands of families, friends, and coworkers come together to support NAF's mission to accelerate ataxia research and also raise awareness about ataxia in their communities. I know for a lot of people, walk and rolls are one of the highlights of the year. They always look forward to the one in their area. So if there's one happening near you, take a look, check it out, attend the event. And if there's one or there isn't one that is happening near you, maybe you want to host a walk and roll someday to bring attention to ataxia in your community. In that case, I direct you to the 4 lovely people on the screen, Joel, John, Rich, and Meg. They'd be your connections to learn more about what goes on or what goes into running a walk and roll and figuring out which ones are in your area. And it isn't just walk and rolls. There's also what we call passion fundraisers to raise awareness for ataxia and also raise funds for research and continuing care support. I've seen a whole slew of different kinds of fundraisers being done, golf tournaments, poker nights, tea times. There's comedy festivals happening. I heard one that there was a high tea that took place in order to raise funds. There's some very creative ways in order to let the community at large learn more about ataxia. And again, if you want to learn more about this, go see the NAF development team. So Joel, John, Meg, and Rich, they'll be able to help you out and share with you about some of the things that other people may have done in your area or around the United States. So at this point, you may be saying, Celeste, this is a lot of information. How do I keep up with what's going on and what changes? Like, this is what's happening now, but you may be offering something new in the future. In that case, I would direct you to Ataxia e-News. This is our newsletter that goes out every month and it is supported by the lovely Molly from the National Ataxia Foundation. So in your email inbox, there'll be a summary about upcoming NAF events, any research breakthroughs we'll bring to your attention. We'll also be sharing member stories. So other ataxians sharing their journey to diagnosis, to accessing care, to living. There's also opportunities to participate in research that will be included in there as well. And also we'll, in those emails, list resources and services, updates, or we'll have old favorites that we'll bring out to remind folks that, yes, this is here, yes, this is happening, please access this. And if email isn't your jam, that's okay. There's plenty of different ways to connect with the National Ataxia Foundation through social media. And this is supported by the lovely Tanoa. Some of the social media sites that we have a presence on includes Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter. Then YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, which I don't fully understand, but I know that a lot of people love that platform, as well as Reddit. So you'll be able to find us in all of these different places, learn more about ataxia, learn more about the research that's being done, and learn more about the National Ataxia Foundation. Also, to round out the communications department here at the National Ataxia Foundation, we have what we call NAF member stories. So what you might have realized from chatting with so many different ataxians over the past couple days is that all of our stories are very different in some ways and very similar in others. And there can be incredible value from chatting with someone else about their experience and how they've navigated things. So this is one way that we try to promote that connection is through sharing member stories. So everyone does have a story. We've shared these on our website. People are able to do write-ups about key moments in their life that led them to where they are today. This initiative is supported by Stephanie Lucas. So if you have any questions or you'd like to share your own story, I suggest getting in contact with her or chatting with her at the banquet. And we publish 1 to 2 new stories per month. And if you're like, I don't really want to put myself out there, that is a-okay. There's different comfort levels, but I would encourage you to take a look at the stories, see what resonates with you, see the similarities, see the differences. There's a lot we can learn from each other. All right, so again, this is just some of what NAF does. I didn't want to go over time, but I think I talked very, very fast, so we're going to have definitely time for questions. That's a good thing. But we also have services that we are developing and providing for healthcare providers, researchers, nonprofit organizations, and industry members. This is a team effort, and we want to make sure that everyone is getting the information they need in order to do the best work possible to advance cures for ataxia. So again, thank you all for listening. For folks who are here, thank you for being here. For folks online, thank you for being here too. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Hi, thank you so much for all the information. Karen's my son Antonio from Brooklyn. I'd just like to know if someone that does not have a full diagnosis, can they donate their brain?
Yes, we do. If you have a clinical diagnosis of ataxia, you do not need to have a genetic diagnosis of ataxia in order to donate your brain. What can be helpful is if you can chat with the clinician who made that clinical diagnosis of if it's ataxia of unknown origin, if it's ILOCA, having those clinical details can be very helpful. One of the things that does happen is when we have folks donate that have a clinical diagnosis but not a genetic diagnosis is in the future years, when more genetic testing is available, more genes are discovered, we can test those samples later on. So for example, right now, with the discovery of SCOT27B, with the discovery of RFC1 ataxia, now we're going back to our ataxia of unknown origin samples from donors years ago, and now testing those samples to see, did they have this form of ataxia? So that's a long, rambly way of saying, yes, those samples would be incredibly valuable if that's something you're comfortable with. Chat it over, think on it a little bit, and also you can sign the paperwork to say, hey, I like to do this, and decide later on, actually, I'm not comfortable with this anymore. We try to be as flexible as possible. So thank you for your question. Yeah.
So with all the discussions on trials and obviously studies that are going on with patients, I haven't heard anything about family members of patients. Are they ever needed for the family trees? They want to test all our genetics too so they can get baseline. Is that something that we need to be looking out for as family members?
That is a fantastic question, and I can think of a couple different ways that family members can get involved with both ataxia research and ataxia clinical care. Let's start with the clinical care and diagnosis side, because that's a little bit more straightforward. When someone is going through the process of receiving an ataxia diagnosis, having an accurate family history is incredibly invaluable in terms of helping the neurologist and medical geneticists and genetic counselors figure this puzzle out. So I know one important role that family members can play is sharing their knowledge during this process. Sometimes you may be asked to donate a genetic sample to compare to see if there's a mutation that is present in you, that is present or not present in a family member, to try to narrow down what is causing the ataxia, because just as humans with random variability, we all have different slight mutations here or there. Most of them don't really do anything, but there are a lot of red herrings out there for the geneticists who are trying to figure out what is exactly causing ataxia. So family members can play a huge role in that. So that's clinical care, that's diagnosis. Let's chat research. In terms of sort of the clinical trial side of things, when they have a specific therapeutic that they're testing, most of the time they're looking for folks who have ataxia. That being said, in terms of the basic research studies and the translational research studies, so that is a fancy word we mean for research that it's moving from the basic stage of understanding fundamentally how ataxia works and what's going on in the brain to let's make this knowledge useful. That's what translational research is. For these two groups of studies, it can be very helpful to have family members participate. Oftentimes, you will be using what we call control subjects. Since, for example, if you have a sibling, they share a significant portion of your DNA, your parents share a significant portion of your DNA, they're as close to as humans can get to a perfect control. If we're using animal models, we'd have two genetically identical mice as close as possible, but one has ataxia. And the last time I checked, doing that kind of experimentation on human beings is illegal. That is a joke, sorry, tried to throw humor in there. But for family members, you're the nearest closest comparison to try to get some baseline levels of either how fast you walk, what your balance is like. So it does vary study to study, but I know just from studies that I've posted on the research page. I'm one of the people who helps update that. There can be call for unaffected family members to also take part. So keep an eye out. It's not every study, but there are ways to get involved.
Any other questions?
Hi, I had one over here. I was just wondering where the best place to get information about insurance might be and how to pay for care and treatment and stuff.
Ooh, that is a very good question, and I know it's something we're working on now. The tricky part about insurance is it's so state specific. So it's hard to give blanket statements of go here, try this out, because it's so dependent on the local context. I know one of the things we're working on behind the scenes is, all right, we get a lot of questions about this. How can we find out the most information possible when there are 50 states, there are several provinces in Canada, there's places all around the world, and we're getting questions from everyone. So right now, we don't do a fantastic job of providing these kinds of information, and I apologize for that. I will say we are working on it. At this time, the best thing, or what we would recommend to do, is if you do see a clinician regularly, either a neurologist, someone at an AAC, even your family physician, they can refer you to a local social worker. Social workers are fantastic as a baseline, and what they are very, very good at is finding programs and resources. They are very good at figuring out, all right, what programs are people eligible for, what different funding services are available within my city, within my state, within my country. So I would definitely recommend trying to connect with a local social worker. They would be the best source of information at this time. And then as a caveat to that, there are certain pharmaceutical companies that if you're interested in a specific medication, they will, some of them have support services for helping you navigate insurance and co-pays. So if you're interested in specific medication, try to see if that particular pharmaceutical company has a support program, because they'd be well-versed in those particular issues surrounding a particular drug. But for more general care and resources, connecting with a local social worker would be the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Merck. I'm here with my wife, Billy. This is our first AAC, and we've been just, you know, our brains are about ready to blow out here. But we've learned a lot. We've met some wonderful people. We've made some new friends. We are the caregivers of our 12-year-old grandson who has a genetic diagnosis of SCA2. In looking at and hearing some of the different presentations, it would appear that there is not a whole lot of research going on in the juvenile adolescent space. I have two parts to the question. First, is that a correct assumption? And secondly, how do we light a fire wherever we need to light a fire to get research going in that space? Thank you.
Well, first off, welcome to AAC and welcome to our community. Let's start with your first question about juvenile research for ataxia. For the SCAs, for the dominant ataxias, they are thought of as being solely adults, that they typically present in adult years. And that is for most people with spinocerebellar ataxia, it will affect them as an adult. That being said, there are instances of children developing these SCAs. We can go into the background another time of why this happens, but it does. Oftentimes, though, we forget, because we are a rare disorder, ataxia is a rare disorder, and there's so few of us that we focus on the majority of the minority. That being said, we can't forget the minority of the minorities, these atypical presentations, because they're there, they happen, and we need to support these folks too. So as you said, or at least for the SCAs, a lot of the research is being done on an adult population because most of the people with these disorders are adults. It's like for recessive ataxia, since the symptoms tend to start when you're a child, most of the research is done on children. That's leaving behind folks who have recessive ataxias who develop the symptoms as adults. So in terms of lighting a fire, I think we need to remember what we call in the medical field atypical presentations. but they're a typical presentation for somebody. So we need to remember the variety of different ways that ataxia can occur. Sometimes you have some curveballs in terms of it's not exactly how it's written down in a diagnostic manual. So keeping this awareness up and trying to see how we can widen the research so that it's benefiting the largest community possible and not excluding anyone. I hope that helps. Yeah, we can chat more during the banquet.
All right, we'll take one more question over here.
You know, you said you had a grandson, 12 years age, with SCA2.
Yeah.
I had a patient who developed SCA2 at age 7 in central Minnesota. And his father also had SCA2, so the mother was taking care of both, her husband and her son. And it's not unusual for that to happen. But research is being done on SCA2. Ask Lauren Moore. She'll tell you. And you can look her up in here, her email address. The other thing I wanted to mention is that so many patients with the various ataxias end up in nursing homes. And I think that's a 30-year-old in a nursing home with nothing to do. There's an organization I was involved with. The founding of it was Accessible Space Incorporated. It's centered in its offices in St. Paul, and their executive director is Steve Vanderskoff. And he's one year he was called the Entrepreneur of the Year. He has developed accessible space living around the whole country. Each person has their own apartment or space, and they share personal care attendants. And they get to go where they want to. And the motto of accessible space is some place to live, something to do, and someone to care. And that's what they actually do. Nevada particularly has a lot of them. It's, right now it's resources are worth over $1 billion. So I can tell you how to get a hold of Steve Vanderskoff.
Fantastic. I think I'm blinded by the light, but I think that's Dr. Scott. So thank you so much for sharing, and check that out. It sounds like a great resource. And I think that's all.
Questions? I think we do have a little bit more time. No?
And if you're tired and it's like, no, I'm going to think on this a little bit, come find me afterwards with those questions. I know at the end of a session, my brain decides, like, yeah, nope, I'm going to be thinking later. So if you're tired and you want to think on your questions a little bit before coming to chat with me, that is A-okay as well. The conversation doesn't need to stop
back
here.
Hi, I'm Amy Tabor. My daughter Corey was one of the speakers earlier. We participated in a research program a number of years ago. My question is, when you provide grants to various researchers, every year you're doing grants, how long do you follow up on these researchers that you've given grants to? In other words, I can't even remember how many years back we participated. I don't even know the results, whether there were any or not, of the research that we participated in. Do you follow those? Is there some place on the website that we can go to find out information about those?
Fantastic question. And first, I'm sorry there wasn't follow-up in your case. That can be very frustrating to participate in a study and not hear anything up from it. I know personally the most exciting thing is seeing the results and reaching that finish line. So if you, as a side note, if you can share with me later what study you were a part of or who did that research, we can track down some information for you. In terms of the original question though, when we award grants, how long do we track folks? This is not directly what I'm involved with, but I will do my best to answer, and then later on my colleagues can correct me. But we do track folks who we award money to. 1 year post the award of the grant, the term for the grant is 1 year. So we expect to see results at the end of that. So we have a long form they fill out with all the details of what exactly this money went towards, what progress they made on their study, and what connections they made because they were able to do this research. Later on, we can also, usually once someone receives a grant from the National Ataxia Foundation, they stay fairly close with the community. They may not receive further funding from us, but they'll usually stay in touch in terms of either promoting additional studies, looking for support in terms of collecting or connecting with colleagues, or trying to access different researcher services. So after that 1 year mark, we'll also have these infrequent check-ins of what's going on, what's happening, how can we do to support, so we can see this progress over time. And because of that, we can usually, in cases where people participate in a particular study, we can connect you with the information about what happened there. That's usually for academic research. In terms of, which we do fund academic research, for clinical trials that are run by pharmaceutical companies, we do not monetarily support those. And for the results of pharmaceutical clinical trials, usually that is proprietary or private. So it's up to the company about whether or not and how soon they'd like to share that information. So if it's an academic research study, we can probably find information for you. If it was run by a pharmaceutical company, we have a little less access to the information there. So it depends on what kind of study was being done. But let's connect afterwards and we can try to find you some information.
Thank you so much, Celeste.
Yeah. Take care, folks.